Yo, what is going on YouTube? It's your boy Dan, aka aDrive. You guys, some St. Louis Rampardos information here. We made some free agent movements this past week for our Season 5 team, the St. Louis Rampardos. And a lot of people have been shocked by this. A lot of people were like, oh my god, what is Dan doing? He has lost his mind. But stick with me, guys, for the duration of this video, and I'll try to explain my logic here, go through the picks I made, the adjustments to the team, and so on and so forth. Now, before I do that, just a reminder, here's some of the ways the draft and the teams work in the GBA. You get 3 transactions. So that means 3 free agents, 3 trades, whatever it is combined, 1 trade, two free agents, whatever it is, and you have to stay within your points. So I have to make sure I always have a tier 1, a tier 2, 2 tier 3s, a tier 4, a tier 5, and my mega. I can never move my mega, but I can make adjustments to the rest of my roster. So let me also start by saying I made some mistakes in my drafting this year, and the reason why that happens, you have to understand, is you go pick by pick. You can have a draft plan, but you can't see what you're going to get 5 rounds ahead of time. You can only hope for the best. So kind of some of my plans got spoiled, caused me to do some decisions that I wasn't exactly happy about after you know, the draft came out, and I wanted to make those adjustments to the team earlier in the season as opposed to waiting later to the season after we've already played a bunch of games, because there's certain things that I needed to kind of adjust on my team to feel more comfortable with it. So hopefully all that makes sense, and hopefully people can be on board with me here. So first move I made is I dropped my 3rd round pick overall, which pains me, Forretress, and grab Blastoise. So I said this earlier in our GBA chat room. Had I had the opportunity and I could rewind the clock, I would have just drafted Starmie there. It was available, but you know, hindsight's 2020, right? I didn't know what the rest of my team was gonna look like. I went with Forretress because I wanted the steel type. I wanted the spinner. Spinners were pretty thin on the board. They're hard to get. There's not too many of them. And at the point in time where I drafted Forretress, it filled up a tier 3 slot for me. And you have to remember that at that point, I didn't use up points to commit to a lower tier mega, which is Mega Aggron in this case. So I didn't want to commit to that so early. And I ended up actually grabbing Keldeo a few rounds later, at that point committing to having to draft a lower tier mega based on my points, because Keldeo has a really high point value. So that was kind of the logic there. So anyway, on to Blastoise and Forretress drop. This was the transaction that kind of sparked me to make these moves in the first place. I had planned on doing this as soon as the draft was over. In fact, during the draft, I almost drafted Blastoise even after I had Forretress, and I was going to drop Forretress later. But I figured I'll just wait till the draft pans out, and if it's sitting there, I'll make that trade. You couldn't make any transactions for week 1. Your week 1 team had to be what you drafted. So I made these transactions actually before the match against Miguel happened. So the match against Miguel had no effect on that, and my transactions really didn't have much of had really no impact based on how week 1 went and whatever else. So Blastoise I felt was a better spinner for my team because, 1, I really like Mega Aggron. I want to utilize Mega Aggron, but Mega Aggron also shares a weakness with Forretress, a fire weakness. And after planning for Miguel, and like I said, I had this plan all along, but planning for Miguel, I noticed that everything on his team can beat Forretress. This thing isn't going to be very effective for me. And while I can utilize it as a physically defensive wall, or you know, kind of I guess it could be a defensive pivot because of Volt Switch, kind of, you know, and a hazard stacker, I felt that Blastoise fit the dimension of my team better. And the fact that it gives me a bulky water, which otherwise I lacked. Looking at in-division, you know, situations, I felt it matched up better against my opponents within my division, the Piratas, the Arcaniners, or I'm sorry, the Giantes, and the Donphan. I felt like Blastoise had a better matchup against those teams as well, and I play those teams 6 times, so half my matches are against in-division, and those are the really, really important matchups. So I felt like Blastoise fit that better. It gives me a really reliable rapid spinner that can be physically or especially defensive. It does have some decent offensive prowess with a lot of different coverage moves because of its Mega Evolution. While I can't benefit from the Mega Launcher, I can still have those moves for coverage. Not to mention it does get counter, mirror code, number of different things. To me, it was just a better spinner to fit with Victini that didn't share a fire weakness with Aggron, which was a bit problematic, especially for heavy fire hitters. You know, it just felt like it was the right decision for me to go with Blastoise. It also gives me something that can Ice Beam. I'm very familiar with using like Vaporeon and things like that, and while Vaporeon and Blastoise are very, very different Pokemon, I felt that Blastoise can kind of cover some of those roles for me as a bulky water. I think it benefits the team, and I think that move, I think a lot of people understand. Pretty simple there, Forretress, Blastoise, even swap, no worries. I felt like that was the better spinner for the dimension of my team, and doing the things I wanted to do. So it's got more reliable bulk, I think, which is the important part. But moving on to our next deal here, and let me just emphasize the way this works because of the point system. Smeargle is ranked as a tier 3 Pokemon. Muck is ranked as a tier 5 Pokemon. So I wouldn't normally be able to do this move, but because of my next move, you'll see that the points end up evening out. So maybe I should kind of talk about the two moves together. I'll show you guys both. So Keldeo, Heracross. So dropping Keldeo, dropping Muck, picking up Smeargle, picking up Heracross. So that's kind of the logic here. I'll talk a little bit about Smeargle here and kind of my logic between dropping those Pokemon. So for me, I felt that Muck was a really, really cool pickup. I really like Muck, and I would have loved to use Muck this season. I think if someone else grabs it, that it would be a really nice pickup for them. But it was between Muck and Quagsire in terms of this drop, and I felt that Quagsire still has some viability based on the teams I'm playing, whereas Muck I don't really see fitting into the team as often as I would like. It's a little frail on the physical side. It's pretty slow, you know, etc., etc. And I felt like Smeargle could do a lot of things to this team. Now, I do have to emphasize this. The Baton Pass clause does not exist in the GBA, which means you can pass boosts that are not with speed. So, for example, Quiver Dance, passing Baton Pass with Smeargle, that works. There's other sets that I'm sure you guys can think of, but I'm not going to tip my hand here. The fact that this thing gets all sorts of hazards, it gets every move in the game, right? It could Dark Void, it could Spore, it could set up rocks and Sticky Web and whatever else. And against the right team, it can be very, very effective. And it also kind of changes the way my opponent has to plan against me because this thing can do so many different things. And just Sticky Web support alone changes the dimension of this team on paper, allowing Victina to do more work, etc., etc. Now, I understand in standard play, Smeargle's, you know, sometimes used in Ubers, sometimes used just sporadically throughout. But because of the Baton Pass clause change, it's not as effective as it was, but in the GBA, that does not hinder it, in my opinion. It obviously, you're able to pass on speed boosts and stuff like that with other boosts. So that alone, I think, makes Smeargle a lot more viable. And I understand everyone saying, oh, you have to carry Mental Herb to avoid Taunt and things like that. I'm really not that concerned about it. Not every Pokemon learns Taunt, first of all. I know what opponent's Pokemon can learn Taunt ahead of the game. I can prepare for that matchup. I mean, there's all these things that I can prepare for, just like my opponent can prepare for Smeargle. But this on paper, I mean, I think this is like, I don't see anything wrong with this. You know, Smeargle for Muck. I feel like Smeargle is going to get more playtime than Muck would have anyway, and I think it changes. You got to think about it this way. It changes how my opponent has to game plan every single week. Last season, I showed with a very, very defensive and slow team that I could win pretty much every week and have my opponents prepare for threats like Terrakion, and then I wouldn't even bring them. So, and then when I did bring them, they were just like ridiculous because people couldn't handle them because they thought, oh, maybe he's not going to bring Terrakion. He hasn't. I don't think I brought Terrakion for the first 5 games last year, and it was my first pick overall. So, you know, things like Smeargle changes the way people have to prepare, and that's kind of my logic there. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, if you guys have questions, feel free to throw them in the comment section below. Let me know what you're thinking about this free agent moves and how you feel about how it changes the dynamics of the team and the dimensions of the team, and I'll try to answer anyone's questions you guys might have. But I think this is gonna be where it's at. And of course, the last move, which is probably the one that's got everyone up in arms. Oh my God, aDrive, he dropped Keldeo. He's lost his mind. Well, by dropping Keldeo, that freed up the point space for me to grab both Heracross and Smeargle. Just another note here in the GBA, Tier 1 and Tier 2 Pokemon cannot be picked up through free agency, so that also explains a little bit of the logic here. By dropping Keldeo, I wasn't able to pick up another Tier 1 to replace it, or Tier 2. I had to pick up Tier 3 or below. So if Heracross happens to fall into Tier 3, as does Smeargle. That's my logic there. So anyway, by dropping Keldeo, I was able to free up enough room for both Heracross and Smeargle, and I had debated on grabbing Venusaur over Smeargle, and I had kind of gone back and forth. Trevenant was another idea I was thinking of in terms of what's already available, even Sableye, regular Sableye sitting there, but I ultimately went with Heracross and Smeargle. I just explained my Smeargle reasons, but Heracross here is a Pokemon I used in Season 3, which a lot of people don't know that I was even a team in Season 3, but the season was cut short, and the limited time I did have Heracross, I used it pretty effectively. I think I ended up picking up a few kills with it. Heracross is a Pokemon I've known very, very well. It's got a decent speed set. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's so much slower than Keldeo, and it is. It doesn't break that 100 speed barrier. It's 85, but it's got 2 very, very viable abilities in Guts and Moxie. Moxie sweeping Heracross is insane, first of all, and Guts allows me to have a status absorber, which I kind of got familiar with by using Conkeldurr in the UCL, and I really like having that opportunity for this thing to come in and take, you know, scalds and get burned, things like that. It's just going to give him a nice boost. This thing is a ginormous wall breaker, and what it does is it gives me a physically offensive threat to take some pressure off of Victini from the physical side. I have plenty of offensive options. I'm not worried about that. I have Jolteon, which is amazing from the special side. Sylveon hits incredibly hard. It's one of the better wall breakers, especially when you slap a Specs on it. Victini is one of the best offensive threats in the game. And obviously Salamence has the ability to set up and sweep. So to me, having Keldeo was useful, but I didn't really think it was going to be that great. It's very one-dimensional. I know you can run Calm Mind, sub Keldeo, but for the most part, you know Keldeo, if it's going to be attacking, it's going to use Secret Sword, or Sacred Sword, I forget which one it is, Scald, Hydro Pump, and Icy Wind. Those are the only moves it's gonna have, and then maybe HP Grass or whatever if you're facing something where it's situational. But that's it. You know that's what it's gonna be carrying, and it doesn't really give it that many options. Whereas, so that's that, and you know what a speed tier is. You might run a Scarf, you might run a Specs, Life Orb, whatever. So I mean, I get it. It gets a lot of sets that way, but I just feel like Heracross has a lot more options. It hits actually harder than Keldeo, assuming Keldeo doesn't click Hydro Pump because of that extra base power on those attacking moves like Close Combat and Mega Horn. From a divisional perspective, I think it matches up really, really well. So please understand my logic there in terms of looking at what my division opponents have and how effective they are. Keldeo against Old Man Tup's team is useless. It's useless. It's not even like, I probably wouldn't even be able to bring it because it just completely gets walled by some of the mons on his team. Whereas Heracross actually has a really decent matchup against a lot of his Pokemon. And the same goes for all the other teams in my division. I felt that Heracross had the best matchup. I felt that it's got a fast enough speed that it can be a wall breaker to outpace those slower Pokemon. It's got decent bulk. I know it's got a 4 times fly weakness, but I think the 4 times fly weakness is mitigated by a lot of other things on my team. It pairs nicely with Aggron. I know it's got that fire weakness too, but at least it's not 4 times fire weak. And again, I like the idea that it has Moxie, so I can run it Scarfed and get that Moxie boost. I mean, even like a Life Orb set, Assault Vest, as I mentioned before. And then I really like the Guts ability. I think Guts can come in a lot of usefulness. It can be very useful, especially if like I have to take a Scald or you get Toxic or whatever. It keeps my opponent from setting up T-Spikes, things like that. I mean, I really like how Heracross kind of looks. Plus, he's got, you know, neutrality to Stealth Rock, which isn't too bad either, so I don't have to worry about that. So ultimately, I felt like those are the right decisions. You can see the full team, obviously, on the screen with the changes. I saw that the GBA released a video discussing these changes as well, and I got a decent amount of flack for it. Why is he making these changes early in the season? Why? It's only week 1. What is he doing? He doesn't even know his team yet. He loses 1 week and then he just makes all these changes. Guys, it has nothing to do with me losing. This was alongside my plan pretty much the entire time, especially the Blastoise Forretress thing, and then the other stuff I just couldn't pass on Heracross because this thing is an absolute monster. So I would say I feel really good about my decisions, and hopefully my video here will at least justify them and give you guys some insight as to why I did those things. And I look forward to the rest of the season. I think that, you know, I'm going to get some hate for making all the transactions right away, because like, how do I know what could be dropped or whatever else? This is my team. This is the team. If we're going to go anywhere, it's going to be this team. That's it. We can't make any more moves. I'm ready to rock and roll, and I'm feeling very optimistic about these changes. I think they're going to be very effective, and hopefully I can show you guys, you know, over the next couple weeks that these Pokemon will be effective for this team and be the better fit overall. So that's gonna be it for me, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. One last thing, if you want to pick up a St. Louis Rampardos t-shirt, we actually have them relaunched now. They're not the limited edition shirts that they were, but you can still get a St. Louis Rampardos shirt, so check out the description for the link for that. And that's gonna be it, guys. Let me know if you have questions in the comment section below. My name is Dan. I'll see you guys on Saturday. Peace.